on YouTube. Andrew Miller, Tarik LaCour, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. We are coming back at y'all today with our kind of Big 12 preview and predictions. We'll cover Texas with our season predictions as well. We'll do more videos before the season begins, but taking a higher level look at the conference, we're also going to take a look at kind of like a first half training camp recap. I think today, in terms of like the fall camp calendar, marks the halfway point. We're 2.5 weeks in. We had our first scrimmage of fall camp last weekend, have the second and final one this coming weekend. And then from there, a little less than 2 weeks before the season. I think from today, 15 days as of when we're recording before the season begins, September 2nd against Rice. I'll start here. So through the first half of fall practice, I mean, if you break it down to the individual practices, there's so many like standouts you could name, but like just a few of the like notes and players and different nuggets, things like that have caught my attention. I think first and foremost, this is an obvious one, but the strength of the wide receiver room. I was talking today, I think it was Mark Rogers' show, that, I said that this is definitely the best wide receiver room I've seen at Texas since I've been covering the team, and it's not even close, but I've been covering the team since 2016. I think you could argue that this is the most talent and depth that there's been in the wide receiver room in the last 2 or 3 decades. I mean, because you had some pretty good wide receiver rooms in the mid to late 2000s, even in the early 2000s, but I think just in terms of depth, that's a valid statement. And then, for the quarterback room, I think you're really starting to see like that backup quarterback competition heat up. I'm going to put that whole like Arch Manning versus Quinn Ewers thing to bed. I think you're getting people that are digging so deep at this point to try to find a way to see Arch Manning start just from like a national media narrative perspective, that they're like, oh, well, if Quinn Ewers sucks and throws 5 interceptions each game in the first 5 weeks, is Sark going to keep him in? Obviously,
Andrew, this is what we call the first lesson of journalism class. When there's no story, make a story.
Yeah. Yep. And so it's just the quarterback room right now is in a really good spot. Obviously, something is clicking with Arch, and I don't want to take anything away from him. I mean, obviously, it's great to hear that he's making some really positive strides after having just some freshman moments during spring ball, which is going to happen. He was a true freshman. He was an early enrollee then. But, it seems like Malik Murphy is having a few more ups and downs at this point than Arch. Arch is a little bit more consistent in the scrimmage settings and in team drills. But you're seeing flashes from both. And so that's obviously really good. You need a steady backup quarterback, as we showed last season with Hudson Card. He really came in handy when Ewers went down with injury. And then I think the offensive line, DJ Campbell being able to step up and really lock down that right guard spot, that's one thing I'll be watching in the second half of camp. On the defensive side of the ball, Malik Muhammad just has really caught my attention. I think the fact that he's still in that conversation to get starter level reps at field corner or boundary corner, either one, speaks. Says a lot of the strengths of his game and just his coverage ability. I mean, just as a one-on-one cover corner,
when Nick Saban wants you that bad, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
It's like when Utah comes and they evaluate a 3-star, they're doing your evaluation for you. You need to offer that kid.
Jalen Ford.
Exactly.
Yeah, prime example. If we had, you know what, I won't even touch on that. The biggest question mark I still have on defense heading into the second half of fall camp, it is a bit of a question mark to me to see what the interior defensive line rotation shapes up to be. But weak side linebacker is still like a huge question mark. It's gone from like David Benda being like the first up at will to now Anthony Hill getting involved more in the conversation, to what you said before, Tarik. I do still think that Benda's probably going to be the week 1 starter there, but I'd say by mid-season, Hill could be taking starter level reps there, especially if he does well in kind of this hybrid pass rusher role that he's going to be in to start the season. And then, Alfred Collins, dude's been the talk of the town the last week or so. See if he can continue to step up, if he can continue to be consistent, if we'll see it out on the field, first few weeks of the season. I guess a few other standouts I would name. AD Mitchell has been coming up a lot. Obviously, Jonte Cook, some of the bigger guys or some of the better guys in the wide receiver room. And on defense, I mean, I mentioned Alfred Collins. I heard a lot of good things, yes, about Manny Muhammad, about Jalen Catalon, about Terrence Brooks. And then I'd say last thing, the underrated like rise on the depth chart that I've seen that it has caught my eye. Hasn't been talked about a ton lately, but Colton Vasek, he's been getting most of the second team reps behind Ethan Burke at edge opposite Baron Sorrell. And I think that's going to be something to watch during the season. But I've spieled on for about 5 minutes. What are y'all thinking through the first half of fall camp?
Well, when they call you Baby Boza, man, you probably should be getting some snaps. That's very high praise.
Do y'all like that nickname for him, or do you think that's like just
that? I like the nickname. Fine, that's a lot of
expectation.
That's a lot of hype to put on someone.
Yeah,
but I don't. If I recall correctly, I think Joey Boza was a 4-star. Nick Boza was a 5. I think.
Nick Boza, I don't remember what Joey was.
I know the latter Boza was a 5-star and was always going to go to Ohio State. I remember watching them play a game once and saying, okay, after the game, I said, look, if you have someone on your team named Boza, you can't. It's not fair for you to be playing football. It's just, Ohio State's defensive line during the Urban Meyer years was just ridiculous. But moving on, I think Colton Vasek getting reps is a good sign. It shows that he's got some edge rushing skills, which we desperately need, also very, very much. Ethan Burke holding his own has been good to hear. I think one of the more underrated thing. This is kind of what we expected, but DJ Campbell just taking that right guard spot and saying, "This is my job." I think that's huge. I think Quinn Ewers playing well. The thing is you can tell when people are trying to make a story because everyone has been saying Quinn's been good throughout fall camp. Usually, if you're not hearing anything bad about the quarterback, that means we're probably doing something right. So, and then, for example, Sark at his presser said Quinn was, lights out in the red zone. He had one interception. That was because the receiver fell down. So, and he ran one in as well. So he's making a lot of plays. But Arch Manning is royalty, so you got to put him in there somehow. So I like what we're hearing from fall camp, and I'm ready to be in DKR and see what this really looks like.
Yeah, I think taking a 30,000-foot view of it, there's a lot to be excited about. Everything that you guys discussed. I mean, the joke about Texas, and rightfully so, is the preseason hype is always there, and then they don't always live up to it. I was listening to the Longhorn Blitz earlier this week, and
can I ask one question, Shane, about that?
Yeah.
Okay, is it the hype is always there, or is it someone other than Longhorn fans make the hype? I always feel that's what goes on. I feel like I'm on Twitter for years, and people would kind of give realistic takes, but somehow the only takes that actually seem to hit are these: we should be in the Big 12, we should be winning the national championship, and I'm like, but people weren't saying that. You were just making that up. But go ahead.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I think most of the Longhorn Twitter users and people I meet out in the wild have a lot more realistic expectations of the team and have for the past decade or so. But the media narrative is what gets everything drum up. And then once the media hypes up Texas and the preseason polls come out and Texas is always pretty high, then other fan bases turn that into thinking, oh, Texas fans on their high horse again, blah blah blah. Where that, for me personally, that has not been the case. I've been scoring one too many times to really believe in any of these teams over the past few off seasons. But I think this off season is different. There aren't a lot of holes on the roster. Like I was going to mention earlier, Jeff Howe and Longhorn Blitz earlier this week. Since 2010, there have only been 2 seasons where Texas finished above their preseason ranking, which were very interesting and just kind of back to the original point of the media drumming up this narrative. But I think all the hype this year is very real. I've been excited what I'm hearing about what's going on. Like I said, I don't think there are many holes. Team has a ton of talented playmakers on both sides of the ball. And I think it's one of those things at this point now. I think that Texas is closer to being on the same playing field as it is closer to being on the same playing field with an Alabama than they are anyone else in the Big 12. And that could be a hot take, but I'm excited to see what happens. I think the athletes and what Sark has done in a few years, he's had to recruit to the Longhorns. It's shown with the roster that he's built through the high school ranks and through the transfer portal. So I'm really excited about this team, and I think the sky's the limit. And I'll be curious to hear what you guys think about this. But the preseason number 11 spot, do you take any stock into that? I personally think it's a great spot to be in because you don't have that top 10 pressure, but you're still recognized as the top team in the Big 12. And, like 11, it's not like you're way down the polls. 11 is still a respectable position, but you're not really being given anything. You're not, say, fifth in the country. So I think it's a perfect spot, and everything's adding up for a strong fall.
I think there's a difference between high expectations for a team and high expectations for a program. And I think that's where the national media is lost in the narrative, where, Texas fans expect a lot out of their program just with all the resources that are poured into it and, the type of national brand that Texas is. Same thing with Notre Dame. But, when season by season, Texas fans, a lot of them have been watching football for way too long just to be completely blind to the reality of the, whatever team they have that season. So, I guess moving the conversation back to fall camp. So I will say, before we look just at the Big 12 specifically, let's each pinpoint one player on offense, one player on defense that you think could kind of be like a breakout player in the second half of fall camp, someone that can kind of drum up some buzz heading into the season. I'll say on offense, CJ Baxter. I know that's, I know he's already kind of drummed up some buzz already just from his talent and getting more first team reps lately, but I think a lot of things are clicking for him at the right time right now. The coaching staff starting to trust him with more of the first team reps. That's a good sign. And then on defense, I actually meant to mention Leon Galafal among the first half standouts, so I'll kind of put him back in that category. He's been looking really, really good so far. But I'll say the second half breakout player for me on defense is BJ Allen. Again, a guy that's looking to potentially secure a backup job at safety. That would be a big ascension. I don't remember who I was talking about that with, if it was Shane, Tarik, or all three of us mentioning BJ Allen, like early in spring ball, was getting like third team safety reps. Like he was behind some walk-ons at one point. It was really, really concerning. Something just wasn't clicking for him. He's really started to put it all together during the summer and early in fall camp. So I think his game's headed in the right direction, but I'll pass it over to y'all. Who do you think?
You want one on defense, one on offense?
Yeah, or you just pick one.
Defense, I'll say Jalen Gilbo.
Okay.
Although it sounds like he's been playing pretty well. And then I guess on offense, I will say, DJ Campbell continue to take steps. On offense, I just feel very comfortable with just about everybody. Ian Boyd of Inside Texas made a very good report today on Jake Majors. I thought it was interesting how he kind of built Majors up, kind of say he wasn't the problem, but then in the end still conceded like, yeah, but I see why they're trying to replace him. So I thought it was very fair. So hopefully, I guess Cole Hudson, since DJ Campbell's kind of taking that spot, can Cole Hudson get another spot somewhere else? So we'll see.
Yeah, Tarik, I think your point about the offense, rings true. Pretty much everyone's been playing well during camp, and we kind of know what we have going into the season. But I'd say the one guy that I expect to just keep ascending is Isaiah Nair. Finally got the brace off. So I think we're just going to hear more and more good things as, he completely transitions back from that ACL. I truly think that when it comes to the wide receivers, I might be on an island when it comes to this, but I think there's a clear top four, no shade to Jonte Cook or anything like that. but I think Nayer's in that top 4, and he's going to prove that over the next couple weeks. And then on the defensive side of the ball, going back to a point you made earlier, Andrew, about the interior defensive line and what the rotation is going to look like there. I think Dre Bledsoe is a guy who's going to continue to play really well. I mean, we know he's a freak athletically. He keeps putting on weight. Inside Texas, like you said, Tarik, they reported on earlier this week saying that he's shown flashes of really solid play. It's just more about that consistency. And, if his second year in the program, I think he's going to get some snaps this year. And like you mentioned earlier, Andrew, there are some openings on the interior defensive line. I feel comfortable with what we have at that position, but we don't know what the rotation is going to look like. So there's room for Bledsoe to get on the field, and I think it can be earlier than people expect.
I think so. I actually mentioned Bledsoe in a piece I did earlier this week, just kind of recapping some of the players that were standing out from the first practice of this week, which was Tuesday evening. He only took 6 offensive snaps last year, defensive snaps, and it was against ULM. I think he's definitely going to get more than that, but I think he'll be in the ballpark of maybe a half dozen games played this season and really get him primed to push for a spot on the 2 deep in the SEC next year, because Texas needs that type of athlete. That's for sure. On your point to Isaiah Nayor, I did an article at the site earlier this week talking about other ways that Texas can utilize him. I kind of dived into some of the nitty gritty of how Texas can use him just from an X's and O's perspective, some different analytics that he had at Wyoming as well. The summary of that article is that I would be willing to bet a lot of money that Isaiah Nayor is going to see a lot of deep routes, be motion, field receiver, and down the seam. There's some pretty creative versions of 2 of Sark's base plays that you utilize some deep crossers and some high fades that I think Isaiah Nayor is really, really going to be good in. I think some people might have underestimated how much of a zone buster he is, for one. Maybe not underestimated that much, but for 2, how good of a route runner he is, and how just how good of a target he can be working between the numbers. Someone that large, that's that good of a boundary receiver on contested balls, obviously putting them in the slot, working between the numbers is almost counterintuitive. But, JT Sanders was great working between the numbers down the seams last season with Quinn Ewers, especially when Ewers had time to step up in the pocket and find him. I think it's going to be a similar deal with Isaiah Nayor this year. I think there's a lot of ways you can get him involved there. Okay. Anything else y'all want to say about the team in fall camp before we move on to the Big 12?
Stay healthy.
Yeah. The only player we have that's missing consistent time right now is Savion Red because of an upper body injury. We've had some stingers to Jahdae Barron. They're keeping Jalen Catalon on a pitch count too, but nothing super serious so far, so that's good.